Welcome back to another True Crime Saturday. I have to apologize for one thing. I did say 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it's, 9:37 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I have to apologize for that. That is actually all technical difficulties dealing with an update. So I do apologize for that. And tonight, you guys will notice the board. It is looking a little barren. Now, there's a few different reasons for this. But this is yet another case that we do need to explore further. This is going to actually have to be a full-on video, and actually I do really want to explore this as soon as possible. Actually, I'll be able to go over this much faster than I pretty much would be on any other case, because I do have a theory. In fact, I have a couple of them, but we're going to be discussing one theory tonight. It's the one I believe that is most likely what happened. And on top of that, we're going to go over all the information we've got concerning this case. But first things first, let's go over the basics of this case. So as you guys can see, this is a case of missing children. So I want to give you guys a little background on this, as I usually do, of course. So on the winter of 1945, to be specific, on December 24th is where this story starts. Everybody was settling into the house, into the Sodder residence. It was just the Sodder family there at the time, 11 of them. Joe Sodder, which is the second oldest son, but also the second oldest out of all the children, he was off fighting in World War II. It's not exactly stated where he is or where he was stationed at this point, but we do know that 9 of the Sodder children were home. So, George and Jenny Sodder are the parents, and then we have John Sodder, 22, Marion Sodder, 19, George Sodder Jr., 16, Maurice Sodder, 14, Martha, Louis, Jenny, Betty, and Sylvia Sodder. There's Maurice is 14, Martha's 12, Louis is 10, Jenny is 8, Betty is 6, and Sylvia is 3. So, George and Jenny decided to go to bed at about 10 o'clock or so. Depending on the story you hear, sometimes it's George and Joe go to bed, or not Joe, but John go to bed early, potentially even George Jr. as well. But overall, we see that George and Jenny roughly are going to bed around 10 p.m. Then we have John and George Jr. They went to bed at about 11 p.m. And then at 12:30 a.m., a phone call, which is on December 25th, mind you, on Christmas, a phone call in the middle of the night woke up Jenny. And the person on the phone call was a female on the other end, asking for a man whose name that Jenny didn't recognize at all. On top of that, laughter and clinking glasses were also heard in the background. This is all based on Jenny's testimony, on everything we got off of this. Well, shortly after that, she went back to bed. And then she was startled at about 1 a.m. after she had heard something hitting the house and then rolling or bouncing off, depending on the story you hear it from, off of the house. And then about 30 minutes later, she was awakened, yet again, to find that the bedroom is now filled with smoke, with the den, which is right across the hall, that there was one wall that was actually completely engulfed in flames. Jenny noted that the fire's origin looked like it started near the fuse box. Once again, this is a detail that does change depending on who is telling the story and off of some of the data that was collected. But overall, it seems to be that, yes, the fire was in fact near the fuse box. But after that, we know that Jenny had woke up her husband, George, and then apparently they went to go and get up some of the older kids and then have them go and start trying to help the rest of the family out. Well, after they evacuated the house, they noted that not everybody was out of the house. All the younger children in the attic, which was Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were all upstairs in the attic still asleep, or at least we're told to believe that they were. But now what's weird was when they looked for the ladder, ladder was always kept near the house. Well, it was now missing. And then so everybody else started looking for, okay, let's go to the trucks. Their 2 trucks or whatever, they tried to go and start them up. They weren't working. So then we had some of the members of the family ran over to neighbors' houses and things like this to go and try and contact the fire department. Well, switchboard operators were not picking up. But about 8 a.m. is when they were able to get the fire department over there and to handle the rest of the situation. Now, according to the coroner, they concluded that the fire was caused by faulty wiring. They also said that the children would have died from the fire, but also through suffocation. Pretty terrible way to go. However, the bodies of these 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were never discovered. And there was even issues where the fire, I believe it was the fire chief, he had later on had put a beef liver, which was confirmed by the coroner's office, after claiming it was a heart, he put it in the box and then said he had buried it. They eventually dug it up, and it was basically found out that yes, it was indeed it was beef liver, and that he was just trying to go and put the family at ease. But nobody found any part of Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, or Betty. Well, that's the story we got. I want to go on and look at this a little bit further because now we've got the timeline here. So now this is where we're going to start actually able to break this down and into a pretty good chunk. This is why this is a case where this timeline is absolutely essential. This is amazing on this. And when I say this, you guys will see why I mean by amazing, because this gives off so many details in this case that we can start actually looking at it and be like, okay, well, there's a split, little time here, little open window where this is a little weird. Not to mention the phone call and all this. Just keep in mind, this is 1945, right? World War II is going on, right? Well, this community was comprised primarily, not entirely, but primarily of Italian immigrants at this time. This is over in Fayetteville, West Virginia. Very, very large Italian immigrant community there. Well, the thing is, during this time in World War II, for those that aren't familiar, we know that there was, over in Italy, there was Benito Mussolini. He was a dictator. He was a fascist, right? An actual fascist, not like what Antifa claims, right? Don't listen to them. They have no idea, no concept of history. But if you guys really want a good little history lesson, take a look at World War II, this one especially. This is going to be where I would stop it, so that way you guys can go and get your guys' history lesson on Benito Mussolini if you guys have not already learned about him. Terrible man, though. Of course, with every kind of government, what do you got? You got good and bad that come from it. But end of the day, he was a fascist, right? But he literally, that was his political party. It was I believe it was the National Fascist Party, if I'm not mistaken. But he was on the side of Nazi Germany. Okay? 2 different ideologies. You have socialists and fascists. They're left and right, leaning right. So that's the extent of the politics. I don't want to get any further than that, but we know that George Sodder, the parent, who was also an immigrant, so was his wife Jenny. Her maiden name was Cipriani, but she ended up changing it to Sodder after she married George. But George was very, very outspoken on his disgust and hatred over Benito Mussolini. Did not support this guy at all. And in that community, there was those that basically I don't think they really openly praised his views, but at the same time, there was on the opposite, there were those that were very, very vocal and would actually even get into arguments with him over his views because they viewed the opposite, right? Well, this is where things are going to get very strange because, like I said, pay attention to the timeline. So, we're going to go over the first part. We're going to go over these little notable pieces. I just need to get that out there because there's 2 or 3 pieces in the notable information I found here that are going to be very, very key for this because now we can understand who had motive that we know directly. I do think this is much bigger than just these said people. I think there's something more to it. However, when we're going over this notable information, we're going to go and touch on this timeline a little bit here. So we know, first point here, is Thomas Smith, who's a neighbor who was passing by, spotted people throwing, quote, balls of fire, end quote, at the Sodder residence at 1 a.m. Okay? This is key here. You want to notate that at 1 a.m. So, what do we hear at 1 a.m.? Something hitting the house and then rolling off, or bouncing off, depending on the testimony. So, this is adding in real nicely here. Okay, so this fits in. Well, during October 1945, let's see, what's the guy's name? I'm gonna butcher his name. I do apologize, but it's Fiorenzo Genitolo, which was he was a traveling life insurance salesman. He was also one of George's former employers. Warned George that his house, quote, would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed. He attributed all of that to the, quote, the dirty remarks made about Mussolini. Now, keep in mind, this is all after he arrived at the home, hoping to go and sell some life insurance for George's children. And George said he just completely declined it. No thanks, don't want it, right? And then, of course, they had some, the banter about Mussolini and all this, different kind of exchange, a little debate maybe a little conversation, and Genitolo did not like it, not one bit. So, but kind of interesting here is you go off what he had said, he completely says arson and then death, right? And he puts mention on the children, not on him, not on his wife, on his children, right? That's a little weird, but okay. After that, also, well, not after that, we don't know exactly when this part happened, but there was another person, a man who was looking for work at the Sodder residence, warned George that a pair of fuse boxes would, quote, cause a fire someday, end quote. 2 people, same month, saying the same thing. Okay? That's a little weird. I don't believe in coincidence when it comes to this. It's wartime. And there was a lot of supporters of Mussolini, even here in the United States. Why? Because you have to look at how he was basically hypnotizing people. Not truly hypnotizing, but really it was more of a shock and awe through his propaganda. A lot of business people, a lot of anti-communist and anti-socialist and just regular average Joes were supporting Mussolini, and they liked his view. And why is that? Well, he promoted masculinity at a time when there was war. This is something that could easily be used to sway people into a certain specific type of mindset and to be able to support certain ideologies, to support something that could potentially spread elsewhere. Now, I know that might seem a little bit of a kind of a rant here, but he was charismatic. Now, that's what we always know about dictators. More often than not, they're very charismatic. Right? But he's now swayed communities all over, but United States specifically here, and we know that George was not exactly in a community where everybody loved his views on things. Now, he was successful. He was a very successful businessman, upper middle class from I can recall. But there's that. So now we have motive of at least 2 people here, but we know of one. Next, we also have that there's the missing ladder. It was found 25 miles away, down an embankment 75 feet. So somebody went way out of their way to get rid of that ladder. Okay. Chances are that would have probably been done that night. Okay. So that's where things get a little kind of peculiar. Why is this ladder being found 25 feet away or 25 miles away? And especially down an embankment. Somebody's trying really hard to go and cover up as much as they can and to get rid of every possibility to save these people. Well, the trucks weren't working. Years later, George's son-in-law, one of them, had basically said he probably flooded the engine on both these because he was in a rush. Maybe, but I'm not buying coincidence. Way too many coincidences here, right? Then the switchboard operator's not picking up. That would have not been a common thing back then. And Fayetteville wasn't like, I mean, it's not a super huge town, but also the operators to not pick up for that. No, they're there all hours of the day. From what I could see, at least everything I'd read up on, when it came down to this, they would have been there 24/7. At least a good majority of the areas would have been. This one specifically would have most likely been. Well, let's go over some more about this. So we also know that the narrative also, I did miss one. My apologies. Which is number 5. The residence's phone line had been cut, even though it was almost led to be believed that it had burned out in the fire. Well, here's the thing. Now this is where we have to go once again back to the timeline. So we know that the house was being set on fire at 1, or things were being, balls of fire thrown at the residence at 1. And we know the phone call was at 12:30. It's just a little bit after that phone call. This seems like that was making sure everybody was home, everybody was asleep, things like that, making sure this is all going to work out perfectly. Now, another little detail I should have mentioned earlier was the fact that Jenny had actually gone through the house and she didn't see the 5 children that lived that slept in the attic. Did not see them, so she just assumed they went to bed. But the front door was unlocked.